Have you ever thought about how the world was before the First Crusade began? It was a time of big changes and conflicts. Let's start with the Seljuk Turks. They were a strong group from Central Asia who had taken over large parts of the Middle East. By 1087, they even controlled Jerusalem, the most holy city for Christians.
That's right. But it wasn't just about Jerusalem. The Byzantine Empire, led by Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, was in trouble too. The Seljuks had defeated his armies and taken over important cities like Nicaea and Antioch. Alexios needed help, and he looked to the west.
Yes, and that's where Pope Urban II comes in. He saw Alexios's request as a chance to do more than just help. At the time, the Christian Church was divided into the Catholic Church in the West and the Orthodox Church in the East. Pope Urban wanted to bring them back together and strengthen his own position.
It's interesting how religion and politics were so closely tied. The Pope also wanted to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Many of them faced attacks and had to pay high fees to enter Jerusalem. Urban knew this was a good reason to rally people to fight.
Exactly. And the Pope's idea had another purpose. He wanted to unite the knights and lords of Europe. They were always fighting each other over land. A crusade would give them a common goal and maybe even reduce the violence at home.
It's fascinating how one request for help turned into such a big event. The stage was set, and soon thousands of people would join the call to take back the Holy Land. It's hard to believe how much was about to change.
Let's talk about the moment everything changed. The Council of Clermont in 1095. That's where Pope Urban II gave his famous speech. Can you imagine standing in that crowd, hearing him promise not only victory, but also forgiveness for all your sins?
I can imagine it was powerful. He didn't just speak about war, he made it personal. Urban said anyone who fought in the crusade would be doing God's work. He told the knights that saving Jerusalem would guarantee them a place in heaven.
And it worked. The idea spread like wildfire. People from all over Europe, knights, peasants, even women and children, were inspired to join. They believed they were fighting for something bigger than themselves.
But not everyone joined for religious reasons. Some wanted adventure or to escape their problems. Others hoped to gain land, money, or fame. The crusade wasn't just about faith. It was also about opportunity.
That's true. The Pope's words were also very clever. He talked about how Christians in the Holy Land were being attacked and how their churches were being destroyed. Some of his stories were exaggerated, but they made people angry enough to act.
It's incredible how quickly things moved after that. People swore an oath to join the crusade and wore a cloth cross on their shoulders to show their promise. By 1096, thousands were ready to march toward Jerusalem.
It must have been an amazing sight. So many different people, all united by one goal. But they had no idea what was waiting for them. The journey ahead would test their faith, their strength, and their will to survive.
Not everyone who joined the crusade was a trained knight. One of the first groups to leave was made up of ordinary people. It's called the People's Crusade, and it was led by a preacher named Peter the Hermit.
Peter the Hermit was a man full of passion. He had traveled to the Holy Land before and believed it was his mission to lead people to save Jerusalem. But the group he gathered was very different from what Pope Urban II had in mind.
That's right. Most of them were poor farmers, townsfolk, and even children. They didn't have proper weapons, armor, or supplies. They just believed that God would guide and protect them on the way.
But faith alone wasn't enough. As they traveled across Europe, this group faced many problems. They had little food, and some of them stole from villages they passed. This made local people angry, and the journey became even harder.
And then came the real test. When they reached Asia Minor, the Seljuk Turks attacked them near the city of Nicaea. The People's Crusade didn't stand a chance. Almost the entire group was defeated.
It's a sad story, but it also shows how unprepared they were. The Pope and Emperor Alexios had called for trained knights, but instead, they got a chaotic group that didn't know how to fight or survive such a journey.
Exactly. The failure of the People's Crusade was a harsh reminder of how dangerous this mission was. But it didn't stop others from trying. Soon, the real knights and soldiers of the First Crusade would begin their march.
This group was very different. It was made up of trained knights, professional soldiers, and their leaders, men like Bohemond of Taranto and Godfrey of Bouillon.
Yes, these leaders were strong and experienced, but they didn't always get along. Each of them wanted to lead the crusade and gain land or power. Still, they had a common goal, and that kept them moving forward.
Their first big stop was Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Alexios I welcomed the Crusaders, but he was also nervous. He didn't fully trust them because he knew they wanted to capture land, not just fight for the church.
That's true. Alexios made them swear an oath to give back any land they captured to the Byzantine Empire. Some leaders agreed, but others, like Bohemond, had no intention of keeping that promise.
Despite the tension, they worked together at first. In 1097, the Crusaders and the Byzantine army won their first major victory at Nicaea. The Seljuk Turks, who controlled the city, surrendered after a tough fight.
It was a great start, but the Crusaders didn't stop there. They marched deeper into Asia Minor and won another big battle at Dorylaeum. The Seljuk army was defeated again, and the Crusaders felt unstoppable.
But the journey was far from easy. The heat, lack of food, and long marches tested everyone. Some soldiers deserted, but most kept going. They believed they were chosen by God to reach Jerusalem.
Their faith and determination were incredible. Even with all the struggles, they pushed on. The Crusaders were getting closer to their goal, but even greater challenges were waiting for them ahead.
After their victories at Nicaea and Dorylaeum, the Crusaders turned their sights on a much bigger target: Antioch. This city was very important because it was a key stronghold in the region and had deep ties to Christian history. But taking it wouldn't be easy.
No, it wouldn't. Antioch had massive walls and strong defenses. The Crusaders arrived in October 1097 and began a long siege. They surrounded the city, hoping to cut off supplies and force the defenders to surrender.
But the siege wasn't just hard for the people inside the city. The Crusaders themselves suffered terribly. Food ran out, and they had to eat whatever they could find, even weeds and roots. Many soldiers became sick, and some even died from hunger.
It wasn't just hunger. Winter came and the cold made everything worse. Morale dropped, and some Crusaders deserted. But the leaders worked hard to keep the army together. They reminded everyone of their holy mission and the rewards that waited for them if they succeeded.
The turning point came when a Crusader leader, Bohemond, made a secret deal with a guard inside the city. The guard agreed to let the Crusaders in through a hidden gate. On the night of June 3rd, 1098, the Crusaders entered Antioch and took the city.
But their victory didn't last long. Just days later, a huge Muslim army arrived to retake Antioch. Now, the Crusaders were trapped inside the city they had just captured. They were running out of food and had nowhere to go.
It must have felt hopeless, but the Crusaders refused to give up. They decided to fight. On June 28th, they marched out of the city and surprised the enemy. Against all odds, they won the battle and held on to Antioch.
What an incredible moment! The victory at Antioch gave the Crusaders new hope. They had overcome hunger, sickness, and a powerful enemy. Now they could focus on their final goal: Jerusalem.
It was now 1099, and their journey had taken years. but they were determined to finish what they had started.
By the time they reached Jerusalem in June, their army was much smaller. Out of the thousands who had set out, only about 14,000 were left, including 2,300 knights. Still, they were ready to fight for the holy city.
Jerusalem was a fortress. It had tall walls, deep moats, and steep cliffs. The Crusaders couldn't simply attack it. They needed a plan, and they needed tools. Luckily, a group of Genoese sailors arrived with timber, which they used to build siege towers, catapults, and a battering ram.
Even with these weapons, it wasn't easy. The defenders of Jerusalem fought back fiercely. For weeks, the Crusaders struggled to get close to the city walls. Food and water were scarce, and the heat was unbearable.
Then, on July 15, 1099, everything changed. Godfrey of Bouillon, one of the Crusader leaders, decided to attack a weaker part of the wall. Under the cover of darkness, they moved their siege tower into place. The next morning, they launched their final assault.
It was a brutal fight, but the Crusaders managed to scale the walls and break into the city. Once inside, they quickly overpowered the defenders. Jerusalem was theirs, and their long journey had come to an end.
But the aftermath was terrible. The Crusaders killed many people in the city, both Muslims and Jews. Some sources say thousands were killed, though the exact number is unclear. It was a dark moment in what they saw as a holy mission.
Still, for the Crusaders, it was a great victory. They believed they had done God's work by reclaiming Jerusalem. Godfrey of Bouillon refused to be called king, but accepted the title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre.
This was the high point of the First Crusade. They had achieved their goal, but at a great cost. And even though Jerusalem was back in Christian hands, the Crusaders knew they would have to defend it in the years to come.
The First Crusade was an incredible journey. It began with a call to arms and ended with the capture of Jerusalem. Along the way, there were victories, betrayals, and countless struggles.
It's amazing to think about how thousands of people left their homes to fight for something they believed in. But the story doesn't end here. Jerusalem would need to be defended, and more crusades were on the way.
We hope you enjoyed learning about this fascinating chapter of history. If you'd like us to cover another event or person, let us know in the comments.
And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more history to life. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.